Hey everyone, what we're going to do now is we're going to show you how to actually edit these fields over here. Right now you can't actually make any changes, and you might recall that in our recipe model over here we actually added this new thing that said var is favorite. So we kind of want to let people mark out which of them are the favorites. Okay, so let's go do that. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to detail view, because that's where all our changes are going to be made. You might recall that the detail view has a separate preview, so we're going to tap on that, and this is what the preview looks like. Okay, so you might also recall that if you ever want to change anything on screen, it has to be a state variable. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to change this into a state variable, and this isn't going to be a private variable because content view needs to know about this variable in order to pass in a title for us to edit. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is that this view over here is called a text. It's a text view in that it only takes the string and displays it on screen, so you can't actually edit any of it. You can only see it. Okay, so if you try tapping on this, nothing happens. It doesn't become a cursor or anything. In order to edit it, you need something called a text field. And what we can do is we can tap on this over here. This is a list of views that you can use. And some of these are called controls because they can let you control what's on screen. So down here, there's one called text field. You can tap on this to replace your text view. And now it's going to ask you for two things: a placeholder, which is going to be the gray text that shows up when there's nothing inside. So I'm just going to say enter a title. And this thing over here, when you tab over to this value, I'd like you to enter a $sign followed by the title. Okay, so this $sign, once again, treat it as you are telling the text field that you have authorization to make changes to my variable. In SwiftUI terms, it's called a binding. I like to think of it as, giving it some money so that it will do some work for you. Okay, put a $sign there. It's up to you how you want to imagine this. But just remember, if you as a view want some other view to make changes for you, then you're going to need to give it a $sign. Okay, this curly brace is a bit off. I'm going to press return, and okay, it's in the right place. Remember, you can always press Command A, Control I to re-indent the things on screen. Okay, so this is great. Now we have a text field and it can be changed, right? So I can change this from sample hot chocolate to sample hot chocolate float or something like that. Okay, and it will change. Okay, so let's go test it out from content view. So back in content view, what we're going to do now is we're going to say, okay, hot chocolate soup. Let's tap on this. And if we tap on hot chocolate soup right here, we can change it. We can say hot chocolate soup with extra broth. I have no idea what that means, but sure. Okay, and it can change on screen, but if you go back, you'll notice that the changes are lost. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, the reason for that is exactly what I mentioned just now. If content view wants detail view to make changes to the data, well, we need to pass it in with a $sign. We need to pass it in as a binding. Over here, you see that down here, title, we just pass it in as recipe.title, which means that we're actually taking a copy of our title and we are giving that to our detail view and saying, yeah, do whatever you want with it. It changes it, and then we just completely ignore it. Okay, whatever changes they make, we're like, ha ha ha, I ignore all your changes. Okay, that's not how we should treat our detail view. So we're going to make a few changes in order that detail view can actually edit the title. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is to change this into a binding. Okay, change this into a binding. Okay, remember the term I mentioned just now? Now it says binding. You're going to see a bunch of errors. Don't panic. Okay, so now if I need to scroll down over here, the first error is here. It says title sample hot chocolate is an error. Okay, if you tap on this, it says cannot convert value of string to expected argument type binding string. Okay, it's fairly dense error message. So what I'd like you to do is to go to just before the open inverted comma of sample hot chocolate and type in .constant open bracket. You're going to get a closing bracket for free, but we want to get rid of it. So select it and maybe cut it or delete it and go over to the end of the closing double quotes and press your paste, or you can press your closing bracket. Okay, so now instead of just saying sample hot chocolate, you say .constant sample hot chocolate. It's kind of like saying, I don't really have a variable to pass you right now, but can you just please pretend this is a variable for the sake of the preview? Okay. The other thing we want to do is we want to go back to content view, and we're going to have to add in a $sign before this. Now, one thing you need to know is that when you work with a list, You also need a binding to the list. So I'm going to add a $sign over here, and I'm going to add a $sign over here. This just needs to be done one time, and you can access either the regular version of recipe or the $sign version of it. Okay, it's a lot to take in, but just make sure you follow along and add the $3 signs over here, lots and lots of dollars. Over here, make sure that you have dot constant, and up here, make sure it says binding instead of state. And now let's test it out. Okay, so I'm going to go to hot chocolate ice cream. I'm going to change this to hot chocolate ice cream sundae, perhaps. Oops, I'm in caps lock. All right, hot chocolate ice cream sundae. If I go back, oh, it got saved. All right, because what happened in content view is that I sent over recipe.title and I gave detail view the authorization, as it were, to make changes to it. Okay, so that's great. We can probably do the same thing for description, but I want to show you a slightly different method because you notice that our recipe has 3 fields already. It's got title, description, and is favorite. What if you want to add more? If you're making your own app and you want to add more fields, okay, it's going to be kind of clunky for you to have to keep sending over every single thing one by one. Some of you have probably figured this out by now. What we're going to do is we're going to send over the entire recipe item. Okay, so let's make some changes for that to happen. Let's do it in detail view first, and there's a lot to change, so just bear with me. So I'm going to say binding var, instead of title and description, I'm going to say binding var recipe colon recipe. This is lowercase r recipe because this is a variable, and this is uppercase r recipe because it defines the struct. Okay, so down here, instead of title, I can just simply say recipe.title, and over here, I can still keep this as text description, or I can go change it, right? I'm going to go copy my text field over here and change it to say enter a description, right? And down here, it'll be recipe.description. Down here, instead of sending in title colon dot constant and description colon sampling hot chocolate, sounds like a great idea. We're just going to say send over a recipe that is a constant, okay? And let's get rid of everything after the comma. Okay, and this constant recipe is going to be a new recipe, open bracket, title, colon, sample hot chocolate, and over here, comma, description, colon, sampling hot chocolate. Sounds like a great idea. All right, I'm just going to take a moment to type this out as best I can on my tiny iPad keyboard. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. Instead of sending in like 2 constants or more, we send in a single constant, and this constant is really just a recipe. Let's make it a little bit neater. I'm going to press enter to bring this to a new line so you can kind of see it more clearly. Okay, so this recipe has a title and a description. Okay, and I'm not sure if I missed out anything that caused me to have an error. I think, yes, I might need another closing bracket over here to close off this detail view. Okay, so make sure yours looks something like this, and I'm going to head back over to content view, and I'm going to make a change over here. Instead of sending over a title and description, I'm just going to send over a recipe. And this time round, I'm going to put a $sign in front of it. Okay, so you might be a bit confused. Why does this say recipe and this say recipe? Well, this recipe is essentially saying, hey, this thing over here is expecting something called recipe. Okay, so I'm going to pass over my current recipe, or rather a binding to my current recipe, so that you can make changes if you want to. So let's go over here, hot chocolate soup, all right? And now I can say hot chocolate soups, or something like that. It's a terrible edit, but you know, bear with me, it does change. Down here, you'll notice that this text field is not a fantastic view. Let's go see if there's anything else we can use. And there must be something with a big block of text. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to search for another control. I think it's also called text related. Yeah, I think it's called a text editor. So let's try it. Right, so text editor over here. And the text over here is just going to be $recipe dot description. Okay, so let's try that. I'm going to get rid of this text field over here. And let's try it out over here. So hot chocolate soup. All right, notice over here that, yeah, this text editor doesn't look fantastic. So one thing you can do is you can just set a manual height. So you can use the frame modifier for this, frame. And we're going to say something like height of maybe 100. Let's just see if that works. Okay, so let's go over here. And okay, I think that should be enough space for people. Let's just change this with exclamation marks, go back and tap on hot chocolate soup, and it still works. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is maybe we want to let people actually add this to their favorites. Okay, so I'm just going to add another section for that. Section favorite. Okay, and in order to let people add it to their favorites, what they can do is, let me switch back to the preview of this particular page. And what they can do is they can use a toggle. Okay, so a toggle is something that you will give to your user to let them decide whether something is true or false. So let's just do toggle. Okay, is on will take a binding to the value. So for example, this one's going to be recipe dot is favorite, and the label down here is going to be favorite question mark. Okay, and that's it. All right. Oops, sorry, that's not it. That's that should be a text that says favorite. Okay, so yeah, that's actually it. What we're going to do is we can toggle this, turn it on. Okay, and you can't actually toggle this for this one. I suspect it's possibly because this is a constant. So let's go back to the app preview where you can go to hot chocolate soup, toggle it as a favorite. And if you go back to your recipes, okay, and come back, it is a favorite. One final step to just put the icing on top is maybe we want it such that if it's a favorite, we're just going to put a heart next to it in the label. So let's do that. Okay, so the label itself is an intrinsic H tag, but what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to add a conditional rendering statement. I'm going to say if recipe dot is favorite, I'm going to put in an SF symbol over here with the heart sign. Okay, that's colors. I'm going to tap on the symbols and I'm going to tap on heart.fill. Okay, one thing to note is that every time you make a change, it's going to reset your data. So that's something to take note of. I need to go back here and set this as a favorite one more time. Go back here and there you go. Okay, now everything that's a favorite has some kind of indication on the home screen. Okay, you can customize this all you want. Instead of an H tag, you can have a V stack with multiple layers, like a text on top, a small description below, and things like that. I'll leave you to figure that out. In the next video, we're going to finish up with just being able to add new items to our recipe.